Hello, I'm Tanner Woodford. It's great to meet you. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks so much for having me. I'm founder and executive director of the Chicago Design Museum, a place that sometimes looks like this. I teach a course called Design Thinking for Social Change at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, or SAIC, where we make work that sometimes looks like this. And I send and receive a ton of handwritten mail. One time, a handwritten response to the question, what's worth preserving, looked like this. So for the rest of this presentation, I've got three kind of main questions I'm structuring this around. The first is, why do I practice design? The second is, how does the Chicago Design Museum practice design? And the third is, what's worth preserving? So come with me on a little journey here. We're starting in 1917. Over the past year, I've compiled and edited an evolving timeline of 100 years of Chicago's design history. The only constraint I set for myself was one slide per year. And I did this in effort of people constantly asking, why Chicago? Why a design museum? Why a design museum in Chicago? So in 1907, 100 years ago, Daniel Burnham infamously suggested we make no little plans. This is our starting point. He continued, "They have no magic to stir men's blood, and probably themselves will not be realized. Make big plans, aim high in hope and work. Remember that a noble logical diagram, once recorded, will never die, but long after we are gone, be a living thing, asserting itself with ever-growing insistency. Remember that our sons and our grandsons, and I'll add our daughters and our granddaughters, are going to do things that would stagger us. As the years progress and the work evolves, I want you to take a minute and sit in silence and think about why you're here. Really think about why you're here. What do you have to gain from being here? What do you hope to accomplish? I'll be quiet for a minute. As you're sitting there, I want you to think about the last thing Burnham said. Our children and our grandchildren are going to do things that would stagger us. He's talking about you. As time ticks away, we continue to think big. So the question is, why are you here? I want you to carry your answer with you this weekend, and don't forget to think big. Okay, so first, how do I look at design? What is design, and how do I approach it? In my mind, Paul Rand had the ultimate definition of design. He said, design is the manipulation of form and content. I would add within context to the end. I don't think Paul would complain. He wrote about context often. So that gives us design is the manipulation of form and content within context. Three words I want you to pay attention to here are form, content, and context. So in this example by Paul Rand, form is the placement of the letters and the confident brush marks. Content is the language, the images, and the color choices. And context comprises everything from the political landscape at the time of its publication to the magazines and newspapers the ad ran in. Here's a very different example, also from Paul Rand, made for Chicago-based Container Corporation of America's Great Ideas of Western Man ad campaign. In this image, form is the broken wood and ripped paper, content is the painted face, or maybe the copy on the paper, and context is kind of hard to define. These examples are obviously design, but I also believe design can be defined very broadly. So given the definition, design is the manipulation of form and content within context, one could broaden the field to include guys like this. Meet Igor and Jock, the yes men. I think they're designers whose practice of culture jamming compels them to use lies to expose truths. For them, form might include designing fake self-produced business cards and email addresses in support of a character they're portraying. Their content takes the form of a very sincere apology broadcast live on the BBC during prime time. Now, before I show you the video, you might need a little context. In 1984, we saw the world's worst industrial disaster by way of a gas leak at a plant in India. It was called the Bhopal catastrophe, and it caused something like 500,000 injuries, nearly 4,000 deaths. It was blamed on lots of things, even down to potentially just one disgruntled employee. And shortly after Union Carbide, the company that was responsible for the gas leak, was acquired by Dow Chemical, the Yes Men went on live television to talk about the incident as portrayed as pretending to be the CEO of Dow. So I want to play you a clip here of a few words they had to say.
Good morning to you. A day of commemoration in Bhopal. Do you now accept responsibility for what happened?
Steve, yes. Today is a great day for all of us at Dow, and I think for millions of people around the world as well. It's 20 years since the disaster, and today I'm very, very happy to announce that for the first time, Dow is accepting full responsibility for the Bhopal catastrophe. We have a $12 billion plan to finally, at long last, fully compensate the victims, including the 120,000 who may need medical care for their entire lives, and to fully and swiftly remediate the Bhopal plant site. Now, when we acquired Union Carbide 3 years ago, we knew what we were getting, and it's worth $12 billion. $12 billion. We have resolved to liquidate Union Carbide, this nightmare for the world and this headache for Dow, and use the $12 billion to provide more than $500 per victim, which is all that they've seen, a maximum of just about $500 per victim. It is not plenty good for an Indian, as one of our spokespersons unfortunately said a couple of years ago.
So I'm just going to stop it there. To be clear, those were all lies, and that was not the real CEO of Dow Chemical. Shares dropped 3% immediately after that segment aired, and the Yes Men had made their point. My point: design is broad and can be used to manipulate people. I believe designers have a responsibility to use these powers for good. By the way, if you're curious about this image, you should watch The Yes Men Fix the World on Netflix or YouTube. It's free. It's incredible. Okay, let's talk about a few other case studies on successful design. Apple's amazing at this. They use design every day to manipulate people. One small example: every laptop screen in Apple stores is reset daily to exactly 70 degrees. Why? This angle makes viewing content slightly uncomfortable, so you have to touch the screen physically to adjust it. When you touch it, psychologically, you feel ownership. It becomes yours. I did give this talk once in an Apple store. It was very awkward. Design also plays a hidden role in all major sporting events. At the London Olympics, there were 350 mixers, 600 sound techs, and over 4,000 microphones. For rowing, helicopters and chase boats washed out the noise, so the sound designers recorded the competition one day early and played fake noise over the live event to make it sound real. With an understanding of environment and context, designers can use tools and communication channels to manipulate perception, ultimately defining the way people feel about something. Here's an example in the realm of design for good. Since 2000, Design for Democracy's ballot and election design project has worked to make voting easier and more accurate for citizens through information hierarchy and good design. As an activity in which all stakeholders are involved, design is an action. It's a process more than a product. And here's some student work from a class I teach at SAIC. While researching within the social issue of domestic violence, Monica Paolucci learned that a majority of victims are within a similar demographic. She then designed an intervention on makeup packaging to speak to abused and battered women. This foundation came with a disposable, transparent sticker covering the mirror with quotes by abused and battered women. It then points them to a website to get help, tells them to delete their browser history and find a payphone. So this is all well and good. Why would a corporation care about design? In 1953, Walter Pepke, who commissioned the two Paul Rand ads I showed you a few minutes ago, spoke about this. He said, "Design has been a vital part of the activities of Container Corporation of America. We believe that a company may occasionally step outside of its recognized field of operations in an effort to contribute modestly to the realms of education and good taste." So with a solid foundation and proper framing in place, we can begin to think more clearly about our purpose and our intent as designers. So next, I thought I would tell you just a little bit about the Chicago Design Museum. ChiDM is a nonprofit. It's organized to strengthen design culture and build community. We're focused in Chicago, but we also work domestically and internationally. Museums have changed a lot over the past 400 or 500 years. And one thing that we think about often is how does a youthful, adaptable, and collaborative organization function most successfully today? Our museum is 5 years old. It's volunteer-led and community-supported. We have about 300 members and another 300 volunteers. We plan 2 exhibitions a year and about 50 events. Our gallery is free and open to the public, and many of our events are free too. Generally, we attract about 10,000 people per show. We're located on the 3rd floor of a public shopping mall in the heart of the Chicago Loop. So instead of trying to convince the general public to come find us as a destination, we decided to embed our exhibitions in a place the public already goes. Our cornerstone audience is comprised of families, tourists, passersby, Republicans and Democrats, the young and the old alike. Invoking an audience that might not otherwise seek us significantly lowers the barrier to entry and then capitalizes by being free and open to the public. It's worth noting the museum also acts as a destination for designers and creatives, where we host and plan hundreds of events, workshops, and discussions since our founding 5 years ago. Pictured here is a recent exhibition, Unfolded Made with Paper. It was a juried exhibition that highlighted the work of the Chicago design community, but also included contributions from around the world. It explored the materiality of paper by acknowledging an era of digital technology when more and more aspects of our lives are playing out on screens. It concluded that paper remains unparalleled in its importance and usefulness in design, and that today's designers, artists, and architects rely heavily on paper-based materials in the development, communication, and presentation of their ideas. Unfolded ran from April to August of last year. And though it might be hard to believe, this photograph and the last one are of the same gallery. In fact, they were taken from almost the same spot in back-to-back exhibitions. So in an attempt to define design broadly, ChiDM carefully designs the cadence of its exhibitions and programs so the form and content of each is vastly different from those preceding and following it. This is New Horizon, architecture from Ireland. It was a collaboration with the Irish government, and it was a traveling exhibition that was also part of the first Chicago Architecture Biennial. It featured installations by 3 Dublin-based architecture firms, A2 Architects, GKMP Architects, and Ryan Kinahan. The design concept paid tribute to Chicago's famous grid system established by Daniel Burnham, who I spoke about earlier. So in this case, they're using very light materials to make something that feels really substantial. There are 4 mirrors hanging across the ceiling, 1 on each side. Each mirror is made out of mylar instead of glass, and it weighs about 30, 40 pounds, so you can move it by yourself. The I-beams are not actually steel, they're MDF. And then there's a chandelier in the middle that's just made of 1 piece of brass that intends to look like a full structure. Though the interior was highly polished, the exterior looked like this. It was much more exposed, highlighting the way spaces and environments are designed by architects to evoke emotions. Utilizing the shared language of design to communicate its impact on our lives, ChiDM is interested in both the precious and the ordinary, highlighting the impact of design in daily life. This is our store. Generally, everything within is made by a Chicagoan, and it's offered on consignment. Like the rest of the museum, its physical location, orientation, and content changes with each show. So working across disciplines, at its core, ChiDM believes design has the capacity to fundamentally improve the human condition. This was the first traveling exhibition we hosted. Deborah Sussman loves Los Angeles. It recognized an iconic designer who shaped the visual landscape of Los Angeles and defined the field of environmental graphic design. It focused on the early career of Deborah, highlighting projects that illuminate formative years in her professional development and in the growth of Los Angeles as a cultural center and a global city. Deborah spent the early part of her career working at the Los Angeles office of Charles and Ray Eames. There, she was introduced to the city and developed a multidisciplinary design approach that eventually applied to both her work and her office culture. In 1984, her designs for the Los Angeles Olympic Games catapulted the city onto the world stage in a kaleidoscope of colors that came to define not only the look of the games, but the city itself. This exhibition invited further scholarship on women's roles in collaborative design projects in Los Angeles and the nation at large during a time period dominated by male practitioners. Sadly, Deborah died in the weeks after we invited her to Chicago, well before we planned to open the exhibition for the first time. She had cancer and had not shared that news publicly. When I went to Los Angeles to pick up Deborah's work and meet her husband, Paul Preja, I asked him what Deborah's favorite food was, hoping we might be able to have it at the opening reception. He told me she liked the 3 C's: cheese, caviar, and champagne. Well, he couldn't afford that. So instead, we had Prosecco, sushi, and a classical violinist, music she loved. We also included other details from Deborah's life in the exhibition's programming. The night of our opening reception was also the night of her memorial in Los Angeles, so I read a letter that Paul wrote, and he read a letter that I wrote. At this moment, we began to design every detail of our programming in support of the content on exhibition. Beyond exhibitions, the museum meets its mission of strengthening design culture and building community in other ways as well. We host and partner on a ton of workshops. In this one, a student is building an open source chair designed by Enzo Mari. Before the workshop started, Tim Parsons from SAIC gave an introduction on the life of Mari, and then we all grabbed hammers and nails and started building a piece of his portfolio to take home with us. Another time, we partnered with Cards Against Humanity to release a design pack based on George Carlin's 7 Words You Can Never Say on Television. It's an expansion with 30 fully illustrated curse words from designers like Paula Scher, Milton Glaser, and Son and Zimmer. Cards donates all proceeds from the sales of the design pack to the museum. So far, it's been about $520,000. Earlier this year, we opened the Chicago Design Market. It's an assembly of 5 rotating pop-up stores in the mall next to the museum. Stores include established businesses that have never had a retail presence, like Colossal or Cards Against Humanity or You Are Beautiful. But it also includes emerging businesses who are trying out new concepts. We accomplish this by not charging a fixed monthly rent, instead taking a commission on sales made in the space. Another program is the Great Ideas of Humanity. It's a series of advertisements in which contemporary artists and designers are asked to create artwork that responds to quotes by leading scientists, philosophers, and academics. The series serves as an acknowledgement of the increasing globalization of our world and resulting cross-pollination of ideas, philosophies, societies, and culture. It's inspired by the Great Ideas of Western Man campaign by the Container Corporation of America in the 50s to the 70s. Advertisements from this series have been displayed downtown Chicago on its bus rapid transit system, another moment of creating an unexpected cultural experience. It's also traveled to Hong Kong as part of the Business of Design Week conference last year. And then occasionally, because of the accessibility of our gallery, we have an opportunity to make a greater impact on the world. In 2015, a handful of kids wandered into our gallery. We started a conversation with them and learned they're part of a group called the Farah Foundation, which is built to support kids whose parents have been killed or incarcerated due to gun violence. Here's a short interview with the kids.
A dancer, because I love to dance, and that's the thing that I know how to do the most.
A basketball player.
A doctor, because I want to help people that's sick.
A math teacher. Architect.
A police officer.
I want to be a doctor. I want to help people too.
When I grow up, I want to be a doctor. So ever since I was little, I wanted to save people's lives because I feel that everybody deserves to live.
Scary movies.
Like what?
Chucky.
I stutter, and that's the scariest thing. I don't like talking, but I gotta get out of it one day.
When it be a lot of shooting.
Violence.
Like shootings.
That I might lose my life one day. Doing wrong things, being in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Be in the house.
When I'm in the house. Being around my family.
If the shooting slows down.
When I'm in the house.
Staying in the house.
Being with my family and knowing that they're by my side.
You crossing your street, and people don't like each other, they just start they just start shoot, you know.
I made it somewhere in life and not be on a corner selling drugs or dead.
Violence.
Get my family out the ghetto.
Sorry, I know it's heavy, but it's important. So after meeting these kids, we took some time to plan a fundraiser with the foundation. We worked with them for about 2 months and treated them like the adults that they have been forced to become. We were with one kid on his 16th birthday and discovered he'd never had cake. So we went to the bakery in the mall, and we totally blew his mind. Another kid asked us if the dinosaur's blood in Jurassic Park was real. When my colleagues stepped back and started explaining how motion tracking works and animation, the kid totally got it. He was so smart, he just hadn't been exposed to our way of life. So we define our mission very broadly, and that allows us to be flexible as we need to be flexible. I wish I could tell you that the museum does stuff like this every day. It happens to us occasionally, and when it does, we embrace it and we learn from it, and we try to bake the lessons into the rest of our programming. So I thoroughly believe that creating unexpected cultural experiences allows for these types of connections. So finally, in our last few minutes, I wanted to talk to you about a question that's suddenly become very important to me. What's worth preserving? After my mom died in 2012, I found a handwritten note she had sent me. It reads, "Tanner, thank you for the beautiful prints and the azalea plant. You're such a thoughtful sweetheart. I'm so proud of you, and I love you very much. Love, Mom." This letter is simple, but significant. After you lose someone you love, you realize how important it is to preserve parts of their personality. Voices, perfumes, handwriting. I started thinking about it, and before I knew it, I was totally obsessed with writing letters. As part of this study, I've written over 500 letters to people across all walks of life, asking a broad philosophical question. Here's a selection of mail I've sent to friends and family, celebrities, farmers, prisoners, small-town mayors, and some more, and more, and way more. Sometimes I do really stupid things and waste some money. I went to the CEO of Cards Against Humanity, actually, since I'm talking about him so much. The one consistent part of all of these letters is the question. After talking with some mentors, I decided to tie it to both the medium and the original intent. What's worth preserving? Here's a letter that I sent to the CEO of Amazon. It came back to me. I've gotten a few really interesting rejection letters. They take a lot of thought to write. And some great returned mail. James Goggin is definitely at RISD, I confirmed. This came from a workshop we did at the Design Museum on calligraphy. John Stamos, no way, came right back. So much returned mail. So I did bring a bunch of original responses with me. I did not bring them today, I'll have them tomorrow. And I plan to show them at both workshops I'm leading, but if you find me tomorrow, I'm happy to share them with you. I also wanted to read a few of the more interesting and thoughtful replies I've received. Here are 3 of my favorites. Jodi Picoult is an American author. She was awarded the New England Bookseller Award for fiction in 2003. Approximately 14 million copies of her books have been translated into 34 languages in print worldwide. She wrote, "What would I preserve? Voices. It's that which I miss the most. My eldest son's scratchy voice as a baby, my daughter at 5 messing up all the pronouns, my grandfather saying, 'Hey girl,' when I called. We take pictures, but we forget the sound of a beloved lullaby, or a holiday concert solo, or even the smile and the sound of someone we've lost to death." X. Jodi Picoult. John Greiner's Chicago design firm has produced communication for some of the largest retail, industrial, and cultural organizations in the country. John wrote, "Tanner, personally speaking, I want to preserve memories of my early childhood from kindergarten to 5th grade in a small 2-room school in southern New Jersey. I drew cars and airplanes for my classmates in the stairwell and in the boiler room. At recess, I practiced jiu-jitsu on them on the hill in the back of the school. I'm still making images, but the jiu-jitsu moves are more difficult because my classmates are a bit heavier now." John. And finally, Matthew Hoffman. Matthew created You Are Beautiful, a project that aims to better the world in little ways. The message has reached every corner of the globe with over 3 million stickers shared by the community. His goal is to share uplifting thoughts with others. Matthew sent me a package, which is very curious. Inside there was a note labeled "A Gift for You." It read, "I am one of the most nostalgic people I know. Well, I also know you, and I feel that we have that in common. With storage lockers of archives, endless spoken stories ready to be shared, everything that can possibly be preserved should be." Matthew sent me 1 year's supply of strawberry preserves. Even though it wasn't signed, I immediately knew they were from him, and I called him to give him a hard time. And a bonus letter. Martha Murray is a designer. She can't help herself. Currently working in interiors to give people the environment they truly want, Martha spent many years doing graphic design, floral design, and event design. You might recognize Martha as the co-producer of the Ben Design Conference. She wrote, "Dear Tanner, diversity is worth preserving. Diversity in thought, diversity in culture, diversity in opinion, style, ecosystems. Best, Martha. So as Martha mentioned, we recently completed a Kickstarter project. You can pre-order the book here. I'm sorry, I have to do that. If you want to see more, I'll have them tomorrow. I have a bunch of originals, and I'll read a ton more at both workshops I'm leading, and then we'll do some writing exercises based on the responses. So I've been to a ton of these conferences, both as a presenter and as an attendee. This week and this weekend is meant to give you some perspective. My advice is don't waste it. Thank you. Hey. How's it going?
Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
This is like speed dating a bunch of really smart, cool people. I love it so much. Thank you for being here. And I kind of feel frozen by those letters. This in a really beautiful way. I got to thinking as you were talking in the art world. There's this thing that's developed, this practice called social practice, and there's a whole track at Portland State University now that Miranda July has been involved in, and it's the idea that maybe some of art is not just making something and putting it on a wall or in a gallery for people to look at, but to work with experience as a medium. And I wonder, so the art world has social practice, and I mean, it's not a huge thing yet, but there's some people doing super interesting work that way. Does design need a social practice track?
I think it does, and I think it might have one, and I think it might be very similar to the art justice. John was talking about design justice this morning a little bit as well, and I think it's definitely within our power and our responsibility as designers to be activists. And I don't mean political activists, I don't mean that you need to go out and hold up signs in the street. I just mean that you need to realize the problem that's in front of you and redefine it and reframe it to make it something that makes the world a better place. And I'm constantly paralyzed by that, honestly. When I'm approaching a new project at the Design Museum or we're getting some sort of a pitch from somebody, I often feel completely overwhelmed and don't feel like we can accomplish that change. And as I've been working with students, I've learned a lot. And often in the first class, I'll have students identify a social issue. And then from there, they'll begin to define ways that they can have an impact. And in the first class, there's always a student that says, I want to reduce carbon emissions by 5% this semester. And we're like, okay, that's awesome, that's great, your heart's in the right place, but let's really take a step back and think about that. What would a budget look like for that? I had one student who actually, that was her example, and in thinking through the budget and realizing how big it was, she ultimately realized that she needed to do something within our control. So she walked around campus and talked to professors, stood by copy machines, and learned that the bulk of pollution on SAIC's campus is related to dual-sided printing and the lack of dual-sided printing. So she stood by copy machines, talked to students, asked them what they were printing, can it be draft quality, all of that, got all this data, went back to the administration with it, and single-handedly convinced them to make all printers print by dual-sided on default. It was a very small thing, but she got an A+++ in the class. She nailed it. So I think that I don't know if there needs to be a separate track for it, is sort of my point. I think it's kind of inherently baked into all of our responsibilities as individuals and within our powers to make it happen.
When you were talking about what should be preserved, my mind went right to, our show did a trip to Eastern Oregon last weekend, and my producer Aaron loves antique stores, so there were trips to antique stores in La Grande and then the Dalles. And my answer to that question, when I walk into an antique store, what should be preserved? Everything. I'm that person who can't leave it alone. Do you think commerce does a good job at telling us what to preserve?
Oh, that's a great question. No, I think commerce does a great job at taking our money. I think that inherently there are some people in the profession who have a better view and have a way of thinking about the life cycle of a product from cradle to grave and thinking about the way that we are preserving things. I'm very similar to you, and when I walk into an antique store, I also want everything, and I've had to scale back in some ways.
Just to push back a little bit, I mean, I feel like not commerce at the macro level, but commerce at the micro level, and even at eBay, there are things being preserved that otherwise would have disappeared into the landfills of time.
I see, and at that level, I do think that we're guided into what we should be preserving, and it's up to us to curate the things that we keep in our lives that we want to preserve.
There's nothing more strange than looking at other people's old letters, though, and realizing that the preservation process has failed there somehow.
It's incredible, yeah.
Just to switch gears a little bit, you've spent time working on projects where design goes to work for social change, not within the context of the museum so much. And there's a long relationship going back to Adbusters and Occupy and even earlier. I kind of feel like I've heard this discussed and addressed a lot, even just today. My question is, can design go to work as a method of inquiry at a time when people are just trying to figure out what's going on in the country?
Absolutely. I think that's the best place for design to go at the moment. I was really hoping for some softball questions here. Like, what do you think of the new iPhone X? That would be a great question.
Sorry, if you're going to bring the smart. I got some softballs if you
No,
want to
no,
go.
I'm just totally teasing. No, I think you make a good point there, and I do think, I think so. We'll just leave it at that. I'll give you a bad answer.
Favorite things right now? Essentials?
Favorite things right now? That's a great question. My cat. He's a monster. He's
Very
like
well designed.
Yep, he's a monster truck. He just runs over everything and attacks things. We have 2 exhibitions open right now. I probably should have said that. We just opened a show with the Hong Kong government. It's in 17,000 square feet. It's wild. It's been up for 3 weeks. And then we have a show on video games, which is extremely interactive. You can lose yourself in it. And I wasn't aware of Hong Kong design or video games much prior to this. I don't play actively, and I've completely fallen in love with both of those things. So that might be a promotional answer, but it's the truth.
Favorite places in Chicago?
Oh, favorite place in Chicago, my apartment. I love being home. It's my absolute favorite. I love all the public art in Chicago. Right now it's the year of public art. I love walking through Grant Park under the bean and just sort of understanding all of that side of Chicago. I also really love, there's a small bar down the street from my place called Longman and Eagle, which is a whiskey bar. It was one of the first bars in Logan Square that really kind of fomented that community as being a food community. I spent a lot of time there.
Hey, does anybody in the audience have questions? I've been a really rotten host. I haven't been. I hope you're like jumping out of your seats if there's something that.
And I'm full of bad short
you
answers.
to ask about.
Let's make this happen.
I was in Chicago a year ago in November, and I had forgotten just how much public art there is.
It's wild.
If there's a spare wall, I mean, in the midst of like massive skyscrapers, there's still just like a big mural, or all manner of things.
There's an amazing Kerry James Marshall mural that's going up on the side of the Cultural Center. They're starting to paint it, I think, this week, and it's just outstanding and large and colorful and amazing.
Is there a short answer other than, institutional wealth for why Chicago has been able to do that?
I think in the early days when they built Millennium Park and they started thinking about the power of public art to bring people to a place, there were lots of people who became inspired by that and sort of walked away and instituted it in their practices. Well, one of those people is Mark Kelly, who was at Columbia College for a long time and is now the commissioner of the Department of Cultural Affairs and Special Events. And Mark's practice when he was at Columbia was to build out the Wabash Arts Corridor, which is a series of murals downtown Chicago that are massive and from all across the world and really bring this sort of spirit to downtown. And as he's moved into the city, he's not a politician. He came from an academic background, and he's really carried the flag for installing public art across the city. So I don't think it's completely due to Mark, but I think that there are certain people that have carried the flag for public art.
Tanner Woodford, it's really been a pleasure talking to you today. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.